hate to say this because, nobody can see us because we're on a podcast, but I will admit to the broader audience that you are younger than I am. And
marginally.
I know it's just marginally.
I mean, you're 34, I'm
exactly.
31.
You're below 30, and I'm in between 30 and 40.
I'm no longer below 30 anymore. My wife keeps telling me she's ready to trade me in now. This is ClimateTech with Kentaro, a podcast featuring the brightest minds and most influential voices in climate tech. I'm your host, Kentaro Kawamori. It's hard to believe we're in our season finale. It's been a blast talking to founders, investors, and innovators within climate tech and climate broadly. But I have to say, we've barely scratched the surface. The space is ever evolving. Climate solutions that need our support and investment continue to emerge daily. And honestly, I consider myself incredibly lucky to have a front row seat and a microphone that I can share with so many amazing voices in climate tech. For our final episode of the season, we are talking about the sustainability revolution. How are businesses transitioning to address the greatest climate and environmental challenges of our time? And why is collaboration so critical? To explore these themes, I have the pleasure of chatting with Bridget Fawcett, the global co-head of the Sustainability and Corporate Transitions team at Citi. Bridget is also the global head of strategy for Citi's banking, capital markets, and advisory business. On the show, Bridget and I discuss the value of partnerships and what they're doing at Citi to enable more resilient and sustainable business models. We also talk about wildlife conservation, particularly the protection of black rhinos, and a brief plug on cricket delicacies.
I grew up in the Adirondacks, which is in New York State, and it's one of the largest protected parks, I think, if not the largest in the U.S. It's 6 million acres. It's about a fifth of the size of the state of New York. It's the size of the state of Vermont. And that whole area, if you know it, is just incredibly beautiful. And so I always felt kind of privileged to have access to that. And I always felt from a very early age a sense of environmental stewardship and that a custodian of the land, like I really felt this responsibility to give back and to protect. And I wasn't able to do that early on in my career. I was involved with lots of different environmental organizations, but really as a participant on the side, not actively. And so in some ways, I'm at this place today because it really marries the, growing up where I did and being able to feel like I'm helping to act as a custodian of the world the way that we want it and the way that we want to leave it to the next generation.
Today, Bridget is at the forefront of positive change driven by the business sector.
I co-lead our sustainability and corporate transitions team at Citi. We help provide advisory, corporate finance solutions, and capital access to clients who are building sustainable and resilient business models in light of the systems transitions that are underway. And this ranges from large global multinationals to new emerging companies who are enabling innovation and new technologies, much like your company, Kentaro.
So you said a couple of things there. So corporate transitions, why'd you call it corporate transition and not energy transition? What's the thought behind that?
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, there are a lot of different transitions underway, right? There's the energy transition, there's the food and agricultural transition, there's inclusive society transitions, the digital disruption transition. So many different macro themes at play in the world today that really are going to fundamentally change how we think about the world 10 years from now, what the world looks like, right? We have 2 billion more people coming on board in the next 20 years. And so corporations need to change their businesses, yes, for the energy transition, particularly for those businesses that are in hard to abate sectors as they transform their models.
For context, more than 1/3 of emissions come from heavy transportation, such as trucks and planes, and the heat-intensive manufacture of materials like steel and cement. These are examples of hard to abate sectors, which are industries that are more resistant to decarbonization.
But they may need to transition more than just from an energy lens, right? They may need to think about their broader stakeholders differently. So we think that the descriptor of corporate transition kind of opens up the broader sustainability lens and how companies think about their resiliency.
Yeah, it's a great breakdown. I think, so many people are just talking about the energy transition broadly, which is, I say that's a multi-trillion-dollar transition over time, but That's interesting you put it like that. We had John Schieber on the podcast from Footprint Coalition Ventures, which is the Robert Downey Jr. Iron Man shop. And we talked a bunch about the food transition. We never really called it the food transition. We were just talking and joking about like the plant-based alternatives for salmon, sashimi, and all that kind of stuff. Massive.
I mean, I think also, just in terms of fluency of individuals, to name something, the energy transition also makes one think that it might just be a focus on energy companies, when indeed there's a responsibility for all corporates in this world. But yeah, there are a lot of different transitions underway that people aren't really kind of thinking about it from an umbrella perspective.
Bridget co-leads her team with Keith Tuffley. With the critical work they do with corporate transitions, I thought it was interesting to learn more about how they formed their group at Citi.
Citi is very entrepreneurial as an organization. We have a lot of, great incubators within the company globally. And there's great pride around, thinking differently and creating value in different ways. And I happen to also double hat at Citi by being the chief strategy officer for our banking, capital markets, and advisory group. And so that really allows for us to think broadly about how are we positioning the business for opportunity going forward. And one of the things that we had identified a number of years ago is, not surprisingly, because it's, been out there, everybody has recognized these massive transitions that are underway. But frankly, our corporates hadn't really faced this reality. And we saw that this would be probably an area where a solution set might be needed, that companies needed to really think through sustainability and resiliency differently than they may have had in the past, and that risk paradigms may be changing around it, particularly with climate. So it's been a journey, and we have a really great team globally. It's a young team, very passionate about what they're doing, which is terrific to see. And one of the really focused efforts when we started was about increasing the fluency within the organization around sustainability. And I think that was one of our core pillars, was how do we accelerate and scale the fluency of our colleagues around this topic such that they can engage in conversations with clients faster, because these are really important issues. And, we really don't have any time, particularly when we think about climate, right? And so how do we get our organization focused externally faster? So that was something that we spent a lot of time early on. And probably one of the things that we didn't expect when we launched just even 2 years ago was the pace of change in the broader environment. And so kind of investing early on around fluency. And I wouldn't claim success. We're all learning constantly around that. But I do think that we have, because of our history of Citi in this area, we have really great expertise internally that we've been able to leverage for the knowledge of our broader banking population.
Well, it's been fun to watch you all do it, not quite from the beginning, but from the earlier stages. And, no surprise that you have the bigger job of chief strategy officer as well, because the strategy here has been spot on, right? I mean, 2 years, while it's early, you guys even then were early.
Well,
and
I would say that we were early from that perspective, but Citi has been super early. I mean, if we go back and think about the journey Citi's been on in terms of environmental stewardship and sustainability, it's over 25 years. And it's pretty incredible to think about, what Citi has done. I mean, we back in 2007 was the first time that we announced a carbon intentions, reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, which seems kind of crazy because that was 15 years ago. But we've always kind of been forward leaning, and we really do have incredible expertise in all different parts of our business at Citi around environmental stewardship that we've been able to leverage, fast forward to really, I use the word startup, but we really do have quite a incredible foundation at Citi in this area. So we were able to cultivate all of that and deliver it to clients.
Well, I think the investments are bearing fruit as well, right? I mean, the investments you'd made in the people, the strategy, very much resonating in the market in terms of a differentiated approach and being ahead of it.
Yeah, well, that's good. I think, there have been, that's kudos to a lot of folks at Citi. Certainly Val Smith, who's our chief sustainability officer, and a whole bevy of others. I mean, we could go on and on with all of the expertise we've had. But I think what's really rooted in the success of Citi's focus on environmental stewardship and leadership is really around the partnerships. We've really taken from very early days a consortium partnership approach and really recognized that these topics are not ones that any one company can solve. and you really have to partner. And so that's really been an ethos from the very beginning. And I think we've just have been able to grow that in many different initiatives that we've done.
And that's what I love about the space, right? The investment banking space, especially, it's just as competitive as the software industry is. And, you always have some semblance of direct competition, co-opetition, and collaboration. But I think on this broader climate topic, it skews so much more heavily on the collaboration piece.
Which is so much fun. I mean, I love that part of it, right? I was at a nature and biodiversity event the other day. And of course, we were talking about climate as well. And an individual stood up and said, I think the challenge that we have globally is that we haven't communicated from a branding perspective that climate change is the common enemy for all of us. And, it's obviously true and so intuitive. And therefore, the need to have to collaborate and partner makes a lot of sense.
I totally agree. And I think that's an infinitely more powerful statement today than it might have been in the past, because we're in such a world of extremes at the moment. And, even if we look at politically, the Republican Party now overwhelmingly supports the climate agenda, maybe not to the degree that, the Democrats do here domestically, but there's no longer the discussion of, should we align around this thing? Now it's how should we? But that's a much more productive discussion than 100%. Should we even do it in the first place?
Well, I think also there's been a shift in, well, first of all, I do think probably in some ways accelerated through COP26, right? Of this mobilization of not just the public sector, but also the private sector, the financial sector, in a way that had never happened historically, I think created a common agenda that probably also hadn't been universal. And governments have done, I think, a smart thing to think about climate and sustainability as a growth opportunity and a jobs opportunity. And when you start to pivot to that lens, then you get more people interested in how do you solve the problems, because it is job creating. And I think, to your point, that's where the Republicans and the Democrats can both agree that there are jobs to be created. So if you can start to align around growth and opportunity, I think that helps mitigate some of the political polarization.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And no better way to create a whole bunch more jobs than with technology. It always creates more jobs than it replaces, even though it may replace them in the short term.
Right.
It eventually always creates more. Here, Bridget shares what they're tracking in ClimateTech.
I mean, there's so much happening in climate tech. It is a bit of a situation, like Al Gore likes to say, which, there's a sustainability revolution underway. And we definitely see this at Citi with the formation of new growth companies really across every traditional sector that we might think about. And these companies are really enabling the various system transitions that we talked about earlier, the energy transition, the food and agricultural system transition, the circular economy, inclusive societies, and the like. And while, climate tech companies have been in focus as we think about those creating solutions for carbon removal, electrification of the grid, new fuel systems, et cetera, we're starting to see really the growth of other companies across other sectors, whether it be carbon data, carbon accounting, carbon risk frameworks starting to develop. So a subset of fintech. We're also seeing a heavy increase and lots of activity focused on nature and biodiversity solutions, as this is really a twin crisis with climate. And in this area, we're seeing, companies, some that are focused on, how can we use insects as alternative proteins? We're seeing companies create new technologies for preserving fruit and vegetables to help alleviate waste. We're seeing a number of companies focusing on farming and agriculture systems, again, to yield more crops that are lower in carbon. So there's really a vast array of types of businesses here. But again, the common theme is that they're enabling the various transitions that we see underway.
It's fascinating. And I can tell you that the companies that are definitely going to do the best are going to be the insect-based proteins, because I'm all about that. I'll be customer number one. I was at the San Francisco farmers market right there on the pier. I don't know, it was maybe 6-7 years ago, and there was a vendor that had chocolate covered crickets and worms and all kinds of stuff. And the chocolate covered crickets by far the best thing in the whole joint.
It's a desired taste, but also a desired crunch.
Exactly. That's right. That's right. I was eating chocolate. I felt less guilty because I knew I was getting some great protein.
Exactly.
It was crunchy.
Yep.
Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah.
I can't wait for more of those to come out.
Yeah. I think that it also speaks a little bit about a generational shift in some ways. Like there's a real excitement. I think there's one commonality amongst all of these companies that we deal with, and that is that there tends to be a younger founder. Like the average age of the founders are younger and passionate, not just about their idea and creating a business, which is, of course, important and true, but there's really a mission around, it's very mission oriented. And I think that that's a really refreshing change that we really enjoy. So we really enjoy working with a lot of different companies because of that.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think you all are seeing it as well, right? I still to this day struggle to find the right words for it, but it is, for me right now, it's impossible to properly describe what happens to people's passion and motivation when they show up to work every day and you are 100% aligned to this climate impact that you can have, whether you're on the financing side, whether you're on the startup side. I've never seen anything like it, right? And I think in many ways, there's never been anything like it, this alignment of capitalism and impact. And it's going to be fascinating, I think, when the case studies are written on how that pertains to corporate culture and what that does to individual psychology and motivation when you show up to work every day.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. And I think there's, a bit of... there's been lots of studies around millennials and why millennials are different and Gen X, Y, Z. And it is super interesting, the shift of the mission orientation or the emphasis on this. And I think it's probably a lot to do with a lot of things, but I think a breakdown in a positive way around hierarchy, right? That has allowed, in some ways, a freedom to be able to pursue interest and passion and align what you want to do. And I think that's super refreshing. And I do hope it continues, to your point. And I think you're right. There'll be a lot of interesting case studies around it.
While Citi is propelling businesses to take climate action, Citi is also focused on addressing biodiversity loss. Since 1970, the global wildlife population has had an average decline of 68%. In its 2021 biodiversity report, Citi highlights that an estimated $44 trillion, yes, trillion with a T, of economic value generation, more than half of the world's total GDP, is moderately or highly dependent on nature.
One of the most exciting and innovative financings that we've done most recently is the Wildlife Conservation Bond for Black rhinos in South Africa. And this was a 5-year, $150 million sustainable development bond that will support efforts to protect and increase the population of Black rhinos in South Africa. And what's super interesting about it, it is the WCB's first financial instrument dedicated to protecting an endangered species. So that really speaks to kind of the force or the movement around nature and biodiversity as coming to the fore. And this was a super innovative structure around coupons being used to actually support conservation efforts. So a lot of really interesting elements to this financing that can be used and replicated across other opportunities.
Well, you've got this amazing perch. I mean, you're seeing this across all industries. You're getting to meet amazing entrepreneurs. You've hooked me up with a few of them. And I mean, you must be having just a blast over there. I mean, the gig must just be amazing.
We're having a blast in the sustainability and corporate transitions team. We've are assembling a global team of young professionals who are intellectually curious. They're really passionate about environmental stewardship and social equality and diversity and inclusivity. And I think most importantly, they really want to have an impact on the world and also an impact on the companies that they're advising. And if you just think about the systems challenges that we're trying to solve today, it's really unlike any other. So we are all in it to win it. We're all hands on deck. We all roll up our sleeves. And it's an incredible learning journey for everyone. But importantly, we are trying to have fun at the same time.
Here's my favorite new segment, our rapid fire round with Bridget. Best thing about working in climate.
People, passion.
Hard people and passion. Excellent.
Will to win.
Will to win. I like that. The hardest thing about working in climate.
Lack of fluency and pace of change.
Is that also the most frustrating thing about working in it?
I think so. Yeah. I think it's nobody's moving as fast as they want to be.
Biggest opportunity you see for the community on the horizon?
Oh, jobs with the whole transitions that we've talked about. Huge growth in job opportunities. It'll take time. It'll be complicated, but I think it's a growth agenda we should be thinking about.
I was going to ask you most interesting innovation in sustainable finance recently, but that you may have answered that already with Black Rhino bonds.
Yeah, yes.
Which we just got the Black Rhino at the Phoenix Zoo. My almost 3-year-old is very scared of the rhino. She loves the big cats, but she's very scared of the rhino.
I would be scared of the rhino. It's scary.
It is, but it's a very gentle rhino. It's not that scary. I keep telling her.
Okay.
She'll get there. Look, we really, really appreciate you being on. Learned a ton. Was really great having you. And
I loved it too. Really fun. We could do it again. We should do it again next year and see what progress.
Totally. We'll make it a recurring one. Yeah. Well, that is officially a wrap for season 1. While we're on a break, I encourage you to listen to episodes from this season that you might have missed. There are a ton of valuable insights from our guests, so I hope you check out previous episodes. Before we go, please help us build an even bigger community of problem solvers and climate tech enthusiasts. Share our podcast with friends and colleagues, and also show us some love by rating and reviewing our show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. I'm really keen to hear from you on our listening experience and even guests that you think we should invite to the podcast, so please reach out directly. We're hard at work to make this an even bigger and better show. We already have fantastic speakers lined up for season 2, so stay tuned. Take care, and I'll catch you all in the next season of ClimateTech with Kentaro. ClimateTech with Kentaro is produced by our incredible team at Persefoni and Hueman Group Media. Our theme music is by Guest House. And if you want to learn more about Persefoni and our climate management and accounting platform, please visit our website at persefoni.com.